Well, welcome to the International Ramadan Conference on Justice. And this is going to be our show today. We are live on Galaxy 19 satellite. If you are tuning in through satellite, that's the way to go. As well as on YouTube and Facebook Live of Justice for All, where some of you will be watching us. And this may be the first program which we have for Muslim Network TV. This is the only Muslim channel in North America, broadcasting to not only United States, but covering Canada and Mexico as well. And this is first session of the Justice for All's conference on human rights. Human rights are being challenged. There was Holocaust. All of us know about that. And we have museums, we have film to remind us. But the main legacy of that Holocaust for its survivor was the Human Rights Charter. The world committed, 149 countries signed, never again, that we will prevent and punish genocide. What's happening with that? Mm-hmm. The United Nations came into being, and our country became a major supporter of it. I'm your host today, Abdul Malik Mujahid, Imam Malik Mujahid, some people call me, and we will have several guests. And we have Nadine Menza, who is on the U.S. Commission. She's a commissioner on the U.S. Commission on the International Religious Freedom, called USCIRF. And I came to know her through her courageous work on Rohingya refugees of Burma. And she is serving also as a chairperson of Hardwired Global, an organization working to stop religious oppression around the world. She has advised several major organizations on faith engagement, policy development, and a strategic partnership. Welcome, Nadine.
Thank you.
Nice to have you again.
Thank you so much for inviting me to this important conference.
Thank you so much. And we will have Congressperson Joe Wilson from South Carolina. And I have met him as he also serves as a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, where he is a ranking member on the Middle East, North Africa, and International Terrorism Subcommittee, and a member of the Europe, Eurasia, and Energy and Environmental Subcommittees. Additionally, Joe serves on House Armed Service Committee. We will also have today with us Professor Greg Stenton. I came to know him and met him multiple times while working as chair of the Burma Task Force and a chair of Faith Coalition. Greg Stenton is the former research professor at Genocide Studies and Prevention at George Mason University in Virginia. He's best known for his work in the area of genocide studies, and he's the founder and president of Genocide Watch, the founder and director of Cambodian Genocide Project, and the chair of the Alliance Against Genocide. From 2007 to 2009, he was the president of the International Association of Genocide Scholars. And his Genocide Watch has issued 2 genocide alerts about India. But we will be talking with each one of them and as they join in. But Nadine, you are here. And thank you so much, first of all, for your beautiful work.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be joining you here at Justice for All. So thank you.
Tell me, why religious freedom is so important for you? I mean, we'll be talking about human rights, and religious freedom is one of the basic human rights. So go around violating religious rights, go around violating a whole lot of other rights. So why it is so important for you?
You know, it is the basic right that all people have, no matter what country they live in, no matter what their government is, no matter what the laws are around. Everyone has the basic human right of freedom of religion or belief, to believe or to not believe. And we find that countries that believe in religious freedom and human rights have stability and freedom. And, sometimes there are governments that are afraid of allowing their people to experience freedom of religion or belief, but we find that people of faith are really, really good citizens and provide for a really stable country. So a lot of this is advocating for people to have this right. That's really a win-win.
Nadine, you took a substantial risk of visiting these countries who don't have much respect for human life. Tell us, what countries as a commissioner have you visited?
Wow. Okay, so let me think about this.
I can bring up the map.
I think about 11 or 12. I'm trying to think. It's been a good amount. It's been such a privilege to be able to go with some of the trips I've been on have been with the U.S. Commission, official delegations, and then I've been on my own in my own capacity. As you know, I went to Myanmar last spring and was able to visit with government officials on an official USCIRF trip with my colleague Anarima Bargova, and we were able to meet with all sorts of leaders in the country, civil society, persecuted communities, religious leaders. And after that trip, as you know, because we communicate about this, as I really felt I needed to see and really talk to Rohingyas who had survived the mass atrocities against them. And so thank you for helping me to arrange a trip to Bangladesh to be able to.
You're most welcome. I mean, it was all the work done by you. Arrangement is not that heavy, but you taking a risk. Are you afraid when you are in some of these places?
I never am, because I do feel that God has called me to do this. And if I'm obedient and I'm following what I'm called to do and I'm wise, and I'm always really smart about it, I really have never felt at risk. I was in Syria in November. I went to Iraq and then ended up planes to Mosul. I've really been blessed to be able to go some really interesting places and meet with people on the ground. And I find sometimes in Washington, we can hear, we hear each other talk about some of these countries, but we almost need to reset it sometimes by going back and talking to the people who are experiencing the oppression, that are living through the situation, and be able to have a better understanding of what they're enduring. And it makes us much more effective advocating for them, not just advocating for policy to advocate for policy, but actually advocate for policies that will change the lives of people on the ground. And that disconnect I've seen in myself. And so I really feel like for me, the travel has been a key part of helping me to be better connected so that I could be a more effective advocate.
Well, thank you so much, Nadine. I mean, we requested you to have some prepared remarks as well.
Yes, thank you.
So I just thought to let people into you, how beautifully you handle this extraordinary responsibility on behalf of our great country to stand up for religious freedom. So I just want to connect you in person and let our audience connect with you. But would you please share with us your thoughts at this moment?
Thank you so much. I really want to share a little bit about the U.S. Commission, because I know I wasn't as familiar, even though I'd watched the Commission for years and I'd read their reports. I didn't myself totally understand how unique that we are. So the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, we call ourselves USCIRF. We're an independent, bipartisan advisory body in the U.S. government that monitors and reports on religious freedom conditions abroad. And we use international human rights standards, not U.S. standards. And we make recommendations to the president, to the Secretary of State, and to Congress. Our commission is, unlike other government agencies, USCIRF was formed to focus alone on the universal freedom of religion or belief. This is really important because, the State Department, Ambassador Brownback has, in some respects, a harder job because they consider the bilateral relationship of a country when they're dealing with some of these issues. We put on blinders and we only look at religious freedom. So we call a spade, and then we make recommendations for what the U.S. government can do to incentivize or to help move that country towards religious freedom. Religious freedom is this human right that overlaps with a lot of other rights, as we were talking about civil liberties, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, freedom of conscience. In many ways, its protection, is even for people that have no faith at all. It's a key barometer, as I was mentioning earlier, to the health of a society and the stability. And, so it's really been an honor for me to be able to be a part advocating for such this important right. A key part of our work is the release of our annual report, which contains information on religious freedom conditions over the previous year and policy recommendations. We released our 2020 annual report just last week that covers 29 countries. And you can see that at uscirf.gov. In this report, USCIRF recommends 14 countries be designated as a country of particular concern, or a CPC, for systematic, ongoing, egregious violations of religious freedom. Among those, perhaps the steepest and most alarming deterioration on religious freedom conditions was in India. In 2019, the BJP-led government used a strengthened parliamentary majority to institute national-level policies violating religious freedom across the country, especially for Muslims. Most notably, the Indian Parliament passed the Citizenship Amendment Act. This new law provides a fast track to Indian citizenship, but only for non-Muslim migrants from Afghanistan, Bangladesh, and Pakistan that are already residing in India. This law also gives legal protection to non-Muslims only, excluded from this planned nationwide national register of citizens. So this will expose millions of Muslims to detention, deportation, and statelessness. In addition, the national and various state governments have tolerated widespread harassment and violence against religious minorities, in particular Muslims and Christians. A number of Indian officials have themselves engaged in hate speech and clear incitements to violence. Based on these developments, USCIRF is recommending CPC designation to India for the first time since 2004. Unfortunately, the trend has continued into 2020 with the anti-Muslim riots in Delhi and the ongoing stigmatization and scapegoating of Muslims during the COVID-19 crisis. Hate speech blaming Muslims for the spread of this disease has been shared through social media, with terms like Corona Jihad trending on Twitter. These views are then reinforced by inflammatory comments and incitement to violence from politicians and even mainstream news anchors, resulting in real-world consequences. We have seen reports of social and economic boycotts of members of the Muslim community and even health professionals and hospitals who are refusing to treat Muslim patients. Because they have this pretext, there's rumors associated Muslims with COVID-19 and misinformation. These false rumors have led to the rise of Islamophobia and resulting physical assaults on Muslims. Even Muslims attempting to distribute food aid to the poor have been attacked and warned not to give food to Hindus. USCIRF is also concerned with the Indian government using the current situation to arrest individuals involved with the recent protests against the Citizenship Amendment Act. We believe this is no time to be putting individuals peacefully practicing their democratic right of protest in overcrowded prisons, where they are particularly vulnerable to catching this disease. While India prides itself on being the world's largest democracy, these are not the actions of a democratic nation. As an ally and a friend, the United States should be highlighting these issues and challenging India to do better as a fellow democracy. It should work to uphold rights guaranteed to all citizens as enshrined in its own constitution, which includes the freedom of religion or belief. And it is with the help of your organization, Justice for All, that a spotlight is shown upon this continued discrimination and persecution of religious minority communities, not only here in India, but also elsewhere in the region. USCIRF is looking forward to continuing to work with many of you and on this freedom of relief for all. So thank you so much for the invitation for me to be here today.
Well, thank you so much, Nadine. And we're going to have Professor Greg Stanton as well as Congressman Joe Wilson also will be joining in and will participate in the conversation. But share with me this. You mentioned quite a bit about India. Were you focused personally more? Was it one of the area of your responsibility? And you mentioned Muslims. Were
Yes.
they also subject to persecution, and the Dalit people?
Right.
New name, politically correct name for the
Right.
farmer untouchables and the lower caste people. So what other things are involved in that?
Right. So we did. We certainly have seen discrimination. We really focus on religious discrimination above in ethnic or other. So we don't necessarily focus on a lot of the other issues. You know, we did also see an increased attack against Christians as well in India this last year. And especially with you know an enforcement of really anti-blasphemy laws and anti how do they say it? I guess conversion laws and anti-cow slaughter laws. And so what we find that these are used against communities, all faith communities, really, if they choose to do minority communities. And so, you know, the way that it works with USCIRF is we, you know, for you to be designated as a country of particular concern from the U.S. Commission, you have to meet the threshold of having religious freedom violations that are systematic, ongoing, and egregious. And to be on the special watch list, which we have also some countries on, you have to meet 2 of those 3. And we've, in the past, India has met 2 of the 3, and they really moved up to the 3 this year. I've had the opportunity to work in India and visit India in the past, and and so it is one of the countries that this year I was focusing on to prepare for the rollout. And I do love India. So as a friend, we are hopeful that our report will help the U.S. government to be better informed in helping to negotiate some of these changes. And we'd love to see India move back to where it was before, and allowing people to really engage in their freedom of religion and belief, and to discourage laws that are causing this discrimination.
I totally appreciate you using the words, we love India. I mean, Campaign for Justice for All in India is actually called Save India, because we think this direction is not just harmful for Muslims and Christian and minorities, but it's going to be harmful for the whole society.
It is.
I mean, India in this globalized world need to become better global citizen. And what's the best place to start? Start by allowing people to have religious freedom. India is the cradle of civilization at one time. India has the birth of Hinduism and Jainism and Buddhism and Sikhism and many religions.
Right.
And who have preached good things for humanity. And so I appreciate you sharing that while taking these steps by USCIRF, these are not easy steps to be taken. They are taken for the love of humanity. Exactly. We believe that all human beings are one. All human beings have right to practice, choose their religion, and practice the religion freedom. So India has about 200 million Muslims who, as you mentioned, are not allowed even hospital at this moment, or in some places allowed. They have a separate ward taking to the whole classic untouchability of the civilization there. So last time I was talking with you in a program, you mentioned you're receiving death threats. I hope they are calmed down on those.
Death threats. They have, and I don't think any of them were credible. I think there were people that were just angry and not really understanding what our role was and what the report meant. So most of them are Twitter, email, those kind of things. But really, that's nothing compared to how many people really suffer because they're just trying to practice their faith in a place, unfortunately, like India. And so it's a small price to pay to be able to stand up for people that aren't able to speak out. And hopefully we can help make a difference.
Well, thank you. Were you allowed to go to India to investigate on behalf of the commission? Has commission been to India?
We have not. I'm not sure how long it has been since we have officially applied, but we had been turned down in the past. A lot of us have been there in our own capacity. I've been throughout the country in my own capacity, but years ago, but not recently, and certainly not in a USCIRF capacity. But we would love to come and visit and dialogue with the country and talk further. And see how we can work together to change some of these things that are moving the country in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this and you're concerned about India, and if you're Indian, why don't you call the U.S. Embassy of India and ask them to give visa to USCIRF to visit India? What India is afraid of? There's nothing to hide. Everybody knows what is going on. So why not enter into a dialogue? Dialogue is good for humanity. Dialogue is never bad. So give visa to USCIRF to go there. I know that USCIRF is established by the law of the United States, and it's supposed to be bipartisan. And you are appointed by President Trump. I'm pretty sure there are people there who are appointed by the other side. So how you guys go along with each other?
Well, first of all, it is the most bipartisan place probably in Washington. It's really remarkable when you look at how closely the Democrats and Republicans work together. There is no daylight between us on these issues. We really never vote on a bipartisan divide. Because we all have it unified. So you could be picked by Nancy Pelosi or by Donald Trump, and literally any disagreements you have are not going to be partisan. They're not going to be based on party. So we really are setting a good example. We're really fond of each other. We travel together. One of our Democrats, Anarima Bargova, just traveled to Sudan with Tony Perkins. And, she has worked, at all sorts of progressive groups. He's obviously at the FRC, and they together had literally no disagreements in what they were doing because it wasn't about those other positions they have. It was about religious freedom, and on that they completely agree. So I think as a society, we need to do a little bit more of that, which is we can disagree on a lot of things, but we can still come together on the things we agree on. And religious freedom is a right that, regardless what party you're in, where you stand on a lot of these other controversial issues, we all should work together to have freedom of belief around the world. Yeah, so it's very exciting. It's been a really encouraging place to be in Washington.
Well, if the religious freedom can bring two parties together and tell people in the world what bipartisanship means, and America stands together on one issue, maybe we can take it to other issues eventually.
I hope so. That would be great.
Excuse me. So tell me this. So you have recommended USCIRF, and I assume that, excuse me, you have recommended that there should be sanctions on individuals who are responsible for this carnage in India.
Right.
What is the process of that? Who will pay attention to this?
Right. So I have found that the individual sanctions have been really an important way to call out, religious freedom violations without putting sanctions on an entire country that really hurt individuals that aren't responsible. So we have found they have been applied in other countries such as China and Burma, and so we have recommended imposing them on individuals and agencies responsible in India for severe violations of religious freedom. And so, we certainly welcome recommendations from groups as well that are in the country or working on human rights to make recommendations of people or agencies that they have seen violating religious freedom, and we can consider that as an official. But it wouldn't. The Treasury Department. There's a couple different ways the U.S. government can do it. The Treasury Department could put sanctions that are financial, but then the State Department can also just do travel bans, which are really quick to do, that aren't quite as comprehensive, but could still have an impact on discouraging people as a deterrent to committing these violations of religious freedom.
So you also recommend India to be declared, as you mentioned in your thoughts, as a first-tier country of concern. What does it mean?
Well, normally what that would mean is that there would be a kind of sanctions placed on the government by the U.S. government. So it can be a little different with different countries. So, we are recommending that sanctions be put on some sort, and that the U.S. government engage with them on trying to move and using some sort of sanctions as a enticement to get them to move. Oftentimes, the U.S. government will, for a CPC country that's an ally, will give them a waiver. And so they haven't designated them as a CPC, so they haven't gotten to that point. We have recommended them as a CPC, but the State Department hasn't acted on that. So they're not at the point right now where they're doing that, but that's how it would work if, in fact, the State Department chose to designate them as a CPC.
So if it is designated, what difference does it make to India? Because they have just said that, well, your commission is a special commission of concern.
We do find that, investors, global investors are weary about investing in countries when they're seeing these kind of violent episodes, this kind of discrimination, religious freedom violations. So, there is an incentive. A lot of countries that do end up on either the USCIRF's list of recommendations for CPCs or recommendations for countries of particular concern really want to get off those lists. And they we don't do diplomacy for the U.S. government. The U.S. government has, they're a big operation that's very professional in doing that. But what we do is engage directly with countries to get off our list. Like, we'll say to a country, if you change these things, you won't meet the designation any longer for CPC. We just took Uzbekistan and Sudan both off our country of particular concern list because they met the criteria we asked them. We told them there were things that needed to be done, and if they did those things, they would no longer meet the criteria for a country of particular concern. And they both made pretty substantial progress this year. It was very impressive. And we were able to move them to the special watch list that we have. They still both of those countries are still dealing with substantial challenges to religious freedom. So we're still monitoring them, but there definitely is a way off the list if countries continue to move. And we're always willing to talk with these countries, of course, but most of what we do is really make recommendations to the U.S. government for them to take actions with these countries.
India aspired to be a superpower, and probably they will take more value to if American Indian will stand up for this cause of getting USCIRF to visit India and speaking up for the minorities. While you're receiving death threat from the extremist in India, are American Indian contacting you in appreciation of it?
Oh yes, I have. Yeah, when we talked about the death threats, that's a small part compared to the thank yous we received from so very many people. Thanking us for standing up. So many people in India, so many people in the United States, so many Hindus, so many Muslims, it's Christians. We've had a combination of all sorts thanking us for what we've done. And I personally interact with a lot of people on social media that are sending thank yous. So we've definitely had more support than we've had anger. We just had a little bit of anger. Most of it was probably misunderstood. Like I said, I think it's easy to think that we're against a country when we've done something like this, and that is just completely not true. We're really rooting for India.
Thank you so much. Now, what is your relationship with the? I have a congressman also joining in. Let me welcome him, and so we can talk continuously. Welcome, Congressman Joe Wilson. Congressman, can you hear me? Well, he has called in, and I'm waiting to hear back that if he can hear us. Otherwise, if you can hear me, Congressperson, could you please? This is Joe Wilson, Congressperson from South Carolina, who is a ranking member in a committee in foreign relations. If you cannot, I cannot hear you, so you can call back if possible. So I was talking with you about the relationship with the State Department. Well, it seems this exercise is going to go on for a while. So let me accept that. Let me see if he's calling on my cell phone. I don't seem to hear. Just try one more. Hopefully this time it will work, Congressperson, because we cannot hear you. Probably you can hear me. Just make one more try and change the location. South Carolina is mountainous, I think. Is something there. So we'll please try again. So we were talking about this particular situation that, well, he's here again. And let me see if this time it works out. Congressperson, can you hear us?
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. How are you?
Good. This is Parvez Faruqi. You texted me yesterday.
Okay. Well, you're calling from I'm doing a live show. I was waiting for a congressperson's call who is on the other line. Please call later in a couple of hours. Okay. Congressperson, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, and now we can hear you as well.
Hot dig.
Okay,
Well,
fantastic. Third time is a charm, some people say in South Carolina, right?
You're here. So, hey, I'm just grateful to be with you.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Let me have a little, we have Nadine Mazina here, who is the U.S. Commissioner on USCIRF, U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. And Congressperson Joe Wilson, I have the honor of meeting with him earlier. He is the member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, where he's the ranking member on Middle East, North Africa, and international terrorism subcommittees as well. And we hope that you're having a good time. Are you called often to get into the congressional offices in Washington, D.C., or can you just do the Zoom Congress?
we're into Zoom Congress today.
All right, all right. Well, I hope it is a lot easier and than the otherwise. Have you heard of? And thank you so much for Dr. Greg Stanton, Professor Greg Stanton. Stanton the Great, what I call you, Doctor, for great work which you do. Met you essentially when we were working on stopping genocide, and Congressperson Joe Wilson is one of the sponsors of resolution on Burma, and he is with us on religious freedom and being on against genocide. And Greg Stanton Professor, you are the one who issued two genocide alerts on India, and that may be one of the reasons for moving other people. So, Congressperson Joe, have you read? Did you have opportunity to read the USCIRF report, which has declared and asked the government to declare India as the first tier country of concern? Have you read that report so far?
I have not seen that, but I really look forward to receiving the report. I believe you indicated that Professor Stanton had prepared it. I look forward to reading it. Again, I'm grateful to be here with Commissioner Nadine Mayinza. And so as I'm here to participate, I'm also learning.
Well, that's very good. We all should be always learning. The problem with learning is for children. I asked my grandchildren how the remote learning is going, and they were not quite happy about all of that. So is there a process, Nadine, that report will be shared with the Congress directly? Are you planning some hearing, or what is the process about that?
Right. So normally we will have hand delivered them all. Obviously, it's a little different right now with the pandemic. I do believe it's been sent to your offices, a digital version. All the members of Congress have been sent, but I will make sure that personally we send you a copy so you're able to take a look, and then we will have hard copies delivered as well. We changed the report a little bit this year in that it's just 2 pages for each country. And it gives the highlights and the recommendations. And then we're doing throughout the year deeper dives on each of the countries. So we're able to present more information in a more timely fashion rather than just one big report every year. We now do a medium-sized report and then do a lot of other reports throughout the year based on things that are happening, so we can make a quicker difference, in speaking to things as they're happening. But I'll make sure that your office does have that, so you're able to take a look at our recommendations.
And Madam Chair, if you could specifically get it to Stephanie Pendarvis in my office or in Adaki, and
okay.
They would. And then I want to thank you to. I think that's fantastic that you make it a 2-page report that is not overwhelming, but gives the information that people need to know. Thank you. That is wonderful.
We figured that was what we had, a really small one before, like a 1-pager, and then we had a huge one, and everyone only used the 1-pager. So we felt like this gave people something they could use, but not too much, because the information is important, but the deep dive, you don't always need to do that. But we do have links to deep dive if you're looking at it digitally. So there's a lot of information for each of these countries, but it's also easy for someone like you who's moving around a lot, and if you need to refer to a country quickly, you can open it up, see what our recommendations are. And the other thing we've added to our report is that we open it with it's either trending up or down or the same, so that you can see the way a country is trending. Because we also felt that was important, because sometimes it's hard to pick up the nuance when you read, like, is it better, is it worse? Like, we're trying to at least point those things out to make it easier for you, in particular lawmakers and others working in these fields, to be able to understand our analysis pretty quickly when you look at our report.
And I want to thank you, because that sounds extremely creative. It reminds me of this Index of Economic Freedom that the Heritage Foundation does on each country, and how helpful that is, like you indicate, with having an arrow up or down, which way it's going. And so that is just so positive and so helpful.
Great. I'm so glad that you like it. I hope it will be a useful tool for you.
Congressman, since you are in the Foreign Relations Committee, how Foreign Relations Committee takes the issue of religious freedom in terms of seriousness? Does it fall? Do you have a subcommittee on religious freedom?
Well, actually, every one of our subcommittees, and we've got this is a remarkable story. It's bipartisan. The chairman is Elliot Engel of New York, the Democrat, and we also have ranking member Mike McCall of Texas, the Republican. And I want you to be aware that we do work together which is, I wish that could be true in all committees, but there's been a really positive relationship that we have. And I work very closely with the chairman of the, as you identified, Middle East, North Africa, Foreign International Terrorism Subcommittee, Chairman Ted Deutsch of Florida. And so we work together, and historically, the Committee on Foreign Affairs has been bipartisan to promote, indeed, religious freedom around the world.
Thank you so much. Now, USCIRF, as a commission, as you know, is bipartisan, and I'm happy to hear that your committee is working in a bipartisan way. And I hope the whole country take the direction which all the politicians say, but sometimes it becomes very difficult for them to come above the politics of, which sort of by nature sometimes shines as a divisive process. So, Congressperson, you were very quick to ask her and give her names to actually provide that report to. What will be the process in your view about that particular report when it reaches you? Is it going to become a part of internal conversation, or is it possible that the Foreign Relations Committee called for an open hearing on that issue?
Well, I would be happy to do all the above. And plus, immediately, I'm the chairman of the Foreign Affairs section of the Republican Study Committee, and I would distribute it to immediately to over 150 members of Congress.
Great. Great. We are open. We've been briefing a lot of, in fact, as with Congressman McCall a few times this year, briefing him on some different situations going on in like Syria, for instance. So I'd be glad to do that as well. And we're always available to do briefings if that could be helpful.
Well, I want people to understand that another Democrat I like to quote is Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas. And she points out that good news has no feet and bad news has wings. And so when we work together, the media simply will not cover that.
Right.
And it's perfectly understandable. They only cover when we have arm wrestling. So, but there is good that occurs, and that's why a report like this, Madam Commissioner, will really be very, very helpful.
Okay.
And so once that report is circulated, thank you so much, Congressman, for promising in front of so many people that you personally will circulate 250 persons around that. And if you, Congressperson Wilson, Joe, if you stay here, and Nadine, I would like to ask Professor Greg Stenton, if would you mind sharing your thoughts at this moment about, the whole world, including you and I, go around saying never again, but why it keep happening again and again? I know you have prepared remark, if you could share with us so Congressperson can benefit from it, as well as the commissioner, and we will take conversation after that.
Well, thank you very much for having me with this conference. And I want to especially thank Congressman Wilson for his wonderful advocacy for human rights over many years. One of the things I've learned in Genocide Watch is human rights is a bipartisan issue. It is not a party issue. I have found that I have gotten the best kind of cooperation from both Republicans and Democrats. For instance, we had a resolution that passed unanimously in the conference declaring that ISIS was committing genocide. And that was essentially really led by Congressman Fortenberry, who's a Republican, and Congressman Eshoo from California, who's a Democrat. And it was just a great example of what we can do when we see the facts, tell the truth, and unite. And that is what happened with ISIS. And of course, the results were we defeated them. I think because partly that there was then the political will to do that. And I also want to thank you, Nadine, from the USCIRF, because I think this year's report is the best I've ever seen from USCIRF.
That's one. Thank you. The commissioners put a lot of time into writing it personally, and we have the most remarkable staff. We were very blessed with a team of professionals that know their areas, and the combination of the whole team working together. It was really a labor of love. So thank you. Appreciate you acknowledging that.
One thing I was especially appreciative of, just as Congressman Wilson was, is your observation that a 2-page report is much more likely to be read than a long report. I found that in the State Department when I was working in that. I knew that if it was more than 2 pages, it wouldn't be read. Right. People have too much to read. And so that was a really good idea. And of course, you managed to boil down the facts and get everything, I thought, extremely well presented in these 2-page reports. So I just want to congratulate you and the whole commission.
I will share that with my colleagues. I know they'll be touched that you acknowledge that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Greg, one of the questions which I would like to ask you, that what inspired you to declare twice? I think India is the only country where you have declared 2 genocides. And probably it impacted in some way in education that even USCIRF took India a notch up. And I see Nadine as
he's played a big part in influencing, and we've quoted him quite a few times, and we watch closely what he does and says. So, and my own teenage daughter was completely impressed that I was doing an event with you today. So,
wow, that's something. Congressman Wilson, did you hear that?
Send it to me as an intern, please.
Repeat, please.
Yes. So what Nadine's daughter was impressed that she is going to be with Professor Greg Station today on it.
Well, I'm really delighted. In fact, I mean, it is our young people who are going to change the world. Let's face it.
Okay.
I've been so impressed and helped by so many young people over the years. They are the people who built Genocide Watch. I mean, all of our websites were built by interns. You can do a lot with very little money when you have the incredible intelligence and energy and commitment of our young people today. And we continue to do that. We have had a budget over 20 years for Genocide Watch of $100,000 total. In other words, $5,000 a year.
Wow.
And that is the reason for that is we've never had a salaried employee. All of our work is by volunteers. We have a vast network around the world now with the Alliance Against Genocide. But it is these interns who are the secret. That is the secret, because you get these brilliant young people and they make it happen.
And they care about justice, they care about justice.
They sure do. They sure do.
Indeed, Professor, I share Nadine, both of y'all's optimism, because another facet too is technology. No longer can authoritarian regimes or totalitarian regimes control every and anything, because with just the magic of a cell phone, people can become real pioneers in regard to human rights and document abuses.
That is so true. In fact, I don't believe that the modern human rights movement could have ever existed without the internet and without the modern technology that we've got for communications. We have really brought the world together with it. I'll give you an example. Right now, I'm writing out a project plan for Bob Destro, who's the Assistant Secretary of State for Human Rights, to investigate the massacres going on in central Nigeria against Christians. The Boko Haram, of course, kills everybody. They kill Muslims and Christians and everybody. But the Fulani militias have essentially targeted Christians in central Nigeria. And so Bob wants to know, why is this happening? What can we do about it? And one of the organizations that we work with as part of the Alliance Against Genocide is the International Committee on Nigeria, ICON. They use a technology that the International Bar Association developed several years ago called Eyewitness. It's an app that you put on your cell phone And you can literally film or film documents, or you can record things that you say. It encrypts that data and it stores it in the cell phone until you get to a place where you can upload it. And when you and it also timestamps it and GPSs it, so you know exactly when and where that was done. And you can upload it, and it goes into a secure computer in London, run by the International Bar Association. That evidence is now accepted in courts in Europe because it solves the problem of chain of custody and of no interference or otherwise altering.
So it is a secure way of gathering evidence. On that, Greg, I would like to say that, as a chair of Burma Task Force, we worked on getting Rohingya genocide declared as genocide. That was another bipartisan victory of the Congress, which declared that in December 2018, when it was chaired by a Republican, and it has solid support. And you were one of the earliest person to declare that to be genocide. Now, in terms of technology, Rohingya genocide is documented through satellite before, during, and after. So evidence was overwhelming on that. But why do you think world failed to stop and prevent, as the genocide treaty calls for?
I was asked by Madeleine Albright when I worked in the State Department to confront the fact that the same thing happened in Rwanda. The world knew it was coming, had plenty of early warning signs, and yet when it actually happened, wasn't willing to do anything about it, to stop it. So 800,000 people died. And she said, why did we make these mistakes? I want you to go around and interview everybody involved in those policies. And so I did. Of course, the first thing the Rwandan desk officers told me was, Greg, if you go around and call these mistakes, you're going to have a very short career here in the State Department. Well, I didn't really care because I just wanted to find the truth. But what I learned was there were a number of things that we did wrong in Rwanda that were also done wrong in Myanmar. First of all, there was a refusal to acknowledge the facts. In other words, a dismissal or denial of the facts, or finding alternative explanations for what was happening. And by the way, the word ethnic cleansing, which was invented by Slobodan Milosevic, is a term for genocide denial. He invented it to cover up genocide and forced displacement. There is no crime with ethnic cleansing because there's no treaty, there's no convention. You can't prosecute somebody for ethnic cleansing, whereas you can prosecute them for genocide or for crimes against humanity, including forced displacement. So that was one thing. There was a refusal to acknowledge the facts. Secondly, there was a refusal to see this as a one-sided attack on a people. It was thought of by many people in both in Rwanda and in Myanmar as a two-sided civil war. Well, it wasn't.
Right.
The Rohingya weren't trying to attack the Burmese regime. What, in fact, was done when they did have a very small attack now August of 2017 on I think 12 police force posts where they killed 30 people. What a huge mistake, by the way. That's why I believe in nonviolent resistance. But nevertheless, the Burmese then, their narrative is this was a response to terrorism. That's why we had to send in the army, which is absolutely false, because the Myanmar army was sent in, well before they attacked, before these attacks occurred. And so
yes, you're so right. I mean, the chronology of that is that the attack was already planned when some of those people, hurt their own cause. Congressman Wilson, what do you think? Why, despite evidence, world so many times fails to prevent and punish genocide, which United States, along with 149 countries, is a signatory of that treaty. Why do you think it continues to happen, and what can we do to change things?
Well, I'm so glad that Professor Stanton referenced Milosevic, because I've seen the positive, and that is that I visited with South Carolina Army National Guard troops who are currently in Pristina, Kosovo. And so who would have even imagined it exists? And this has been a success story of providing stability in the former Yugoslav republics, hopefully to maintain respect between the Muslim and Christian populations, but that we have a Muslim country that has been established and being successful right there in the Balkans. And so, Professor, thank you for raising that. And so we can, step by step,
That's right.
look and without hoping to take military action, but to visit with my National Guard troops, and they were just, I run into them when I'm back in the district, and they said how heartwarming it was to be there just simply by their presence. It maintained the ability of a Muslim country to exist, and then as a model to Serbia, that it's not a threat to them. So over and over, there can be positive examples, but we need to be ever vigilant. And it is horrifying to think of the Rwandan massacre, the massacre in Nigeria. And sadly, Professor, when you said massacre, I was saying, oh my gosh, which one are you going to mention? And here we are in the 21st century. This is inexcusable.
Thank you so much.
In fact, let me just mention that, if you don't mind, Imam, I don't mind. I would just want to comment on Congressman Wilson's very.
Sure. Please go ahead.
Kosovo is one of the few success stories where we really have stopped a genocide. And by the way, my son and his wife just served 2 years in the Peace Corps in Kosovo. So they I have a special interest in Kosovo, and we visited there.
While we're talking about a special interest, let me share with you, I was chair of Burma Task Force and Kosovo Task Force, and mobilized a 250,000 rally. And I think Bosnia also, Europe was allowing it to go on and on and on until United States stepped in to stop that. And that continued in creating a country called Kosovo, in which people could be safe from the genocide, repeating what happened in Bosnia. So I want to join the party in celebration of that. This is our commitment.
Let me make a couple other comments, if you don't mind, because it's actually instructive about how to deal with genocide. Kosovo is a good example of what happens when you call it by the right name. Okay. David Sheffer, who was our war crimes ambassador, went up to the border between Macedonia and Kosovo, and he interviewed and talked to many, many refugees who were flowing over the border from Kosovo. And he used the G word. He said, this is genocide, or these are indicators of genocide. Within a week, we were bombing Belgrade. And within that time, in other words, genocide is an action word. Ethnic cleansing is not. Ethnic cleansing means there will be no forceful action. Whereas with the word genocide, it makes a difference to call it by the right name. The second thing to remember about Kosovo is that was a case in which NATO acted. We didn't wait for the UN. We were greatly criticized for that. But I believe that was the right thing to do because, frankly, the UN has been a failure in preventing genocide. And it is time for us to face that. So I believe that regional organizations are actually way more effective for prevention.
So we will continue the conversation with Nadine and Professor Stanton. Congressperson Wilson have to leave. So let me ask him one question, and then I would ask Nadine and Professor, each one of you, to ask him one question. My question to you, Congressman, is that you're committed to human rights. And if Greg Stanton tells you you're committed to human rights, then you are committed to human rights. As far as I'm concerned, you have now a major seal of approval there. Tell me this: USCIRF is not allowed to visit India. India is refusing to give visa, and when, as Greg Stanton has issued two genocide alert, when some senators tried to go to Kashmir, they were not allowed to enter. What, as a member of the Foreign Relations Committee, you can do that if not the commission, which is bipartisan, you take a delegation of the Foreign Affairs, Foreign Relations Committee to India and keep an eye on the issue of religious freedom there.
And I'd be happy for you to bring any specific item to the attention of my staff member, Oren Nadaki and/or Stephanie Pendarvis, and we'll be happy to pursue each one individually. I have already, where there would access to Kashmir. And so please get that information to our office.
Thank you so much. I remember meeting with you on Kashmir and India issue in your office. You were kind enough to spare a good amount of time talking with us. One question people keep asking, and I will bring that up about Sri Lankan situation. But before that, Nadine, you have a question from Congressperson before I let him go. I requested him 30 minutes. He was kind enough to give 30 minutes. And I will
I want to apologize, but actually it's very interesting. We're having, again, an indication of bipartisanship. It's a bipartisan call with the Secretary of Health and Human Affairs, ASAR. And again, you never hear about how we're working together, but both Republicans and Democrats at 4 o'clock have a joint conference call with the Secretary. Please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's very much appreciated. You keep emphasizing that when people work together, people don't notice. Maybe once you play ball with each other, then somebody will cover it.
It's arm wrestling they cover it, Mom.
Okay. If anyone of you have a question to Congressman before he goes. Well, if you don't have a question, the question being asked at this moment repeatedly is with all three of you that at this time when there is pandemic out there, people are in difficulty. In Sri Lanka, the Muslim community, those people who are dying as a result of coronavirus, the government is simply taking them without any loved one and cremating their bodies. And about 10,000 people have signed a petition protesting that why they cannot give a religious freedom as other countries have given to have a burial which keeps in mind 6 feet distance and all the requirement which need to be abided by. What can be done in this area, Commissioner and a Congressman?
And Commissioner, again, it's an honor to have been here with you and also with the professor. And as we see around the world, sadly, the circumstance in Baghdad of mass graves, and you wonder, have families consented to this? And so we're facing something during the Wuhan virus that just has not, in a modern age, been addressed. We do, though, have the success of the addressing of polio around the world. So again, there's items that can be referenced as to a positive nature to protect the people of the world.
Thank you so much. I truly appreciate, Congressperson, you taking your time. And I know you have another bipartisan conversation, and we hope that is going to be successful, and you will create some news through that as well.
Well, bottom line, Imam, thank you, and Commissioner and Professor, but Imam, you make a difference, and I look forward. And I want to invite you, Professor, Commissioner, please come by our office, 1436 Longworth House office building. Be honored for you to come by, get a picture at our window, which overlooks the U.S. Capitol with the dome of the Capitol on your shoulder. Thank you, and you each have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Truly appreciate that. Greg, a question is being asked again about Sri Lanka, and they are saying that what stage of genocide, you have 10 stages, and people are specifically following those stages.
Sure.
And they're concerned, what stage do you find Sri Lanka in there?
I think before I answer, I probably should explain to our audience a
What are
little
these
more
stages?
about
Yes.
the stage theory that we used. I developed this actually back in 1987 when I was studying the Cambodian genocide and realized that there were very common elements that led up to genocide, because I'd also, of course, studied the Holocaust and other genocides. So I wrote a paper back then in 1987 when I got to the State Department and realized that a lot of people in the department, diplomats and so forth, really didn't know what genocide is. They, weren't perhaps trained in law school, or at least hadn't focused on this. And so I wrote a two-page memo that explained what genocide is, and then explained how it develops. And I'm a cultural anthropologist, a structural anthropologist, as well as an international lawyer. And we think of social phenomena in terms of how things develop. What are the processes that lead up to certain things? And what I've found is, and this is not, by the way, a linear model, very important to keep in mind. A lot of these stages of genocide occur simultaneously. But the first stage is always classification. You got to have an other that you're going to target. Otherwise, you can't have a genocide. Secondly, you have symbolization, which you make people wear stars or yellows or blue and white check scarves, as they did in Cambodia and so forth. The third is the stage of discrimination, in which groups that are targeted are discriminated against legally and in other ways. Fourth, you have dehumanization, and that, by the way, is one of the most serious stages, where you start referring to the other group as, cockroaches or rats or microbes. There's cancer in the society, things like that. Then the fifth stage is where the hate groups organization. The sixth is polarization, where the hate groups try to drive the sides apart. And in fact, the first people in a genocide to be killed or to be arrested are the people from the group that is committing the genocide, because they can't tolerate moderates from within their own group who might stop them. So, and that happened in Rwanda, for instance. So polarization is crucial to genocide. The next stage is where they actually plan it, preparation. That's the Wannsee Conference, where they sat down and actually planned out the Holocaust. You have many other cases of that, plenty of evidence of it in every genocide. And then finally, just before genocide, you'll have persecution. Persecution is the eighth stage. It's where you round up people, you send them off to concentration camps, you take away their property, you march them out into the desert, and so forth. And finally, then you get to the extermination stage, which is the actual legal genocide. That's when the lawyers say it's genocide. See, what we look at are the previous stages, what leads up to the genocide, because only by recognizing those previous stages can you do anything to prevent it. Mm-hmm. Once it reaches the stage of extermination, it's too late. It's very rare to find a genocide that's actually been stopped once it's started. I think Kosovo is an example where they'd only killed, is that right? No, it's not right. Let's not speak that way. But they'd killed about 10,000 Kosovars. But fortunately, we intervened fast enough to stop it. That's the extermination stage. And then I wrote this memo for the State Department that explained these stages. But then I realized I'd forgotten a stage. Denial. The final stage in every genocide is denial. That is when the perpetrators...
Nothing happened.
they'll say nothing happened, we didn't do it, or it was the victims who, it was a civil war, or it was the victims who did it to themselves. I mean, you'll find all of these kinds of, they'll minimize the statistics and say, oh, no, no, no. I actually heard this happen in a conference or in a speech that was given by Jerry Rubin in the Washington Lee University when I was a professor of law there. And I got up and I said, don't you think that those of us who were in the anti-war movement were wrong about Cambodia? Because after all, probably 2 million people died there at the hands of the Khmer Rouge. He said, oh, no, 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 no. It wasn't 2 million. It was only 700,000. I mean, seriously, a gasp went through the audience. You can imagine. So minimizing statistics is another type of denial.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I was present in the ICJ when Gambia case and Suu Kyi spoke. And Suu Kyi, I could not believe, stood there and exactly what you said she did. She minimized it and she denied it. And she did not use the word Rohingya throughout in front of the whole world. A New York Times reporter who interviewed me told me that normally ICJ get about 10, 12 reporters, and there were 120 reporters and others were denied entry because there was not much space. So whatever you just said, Professor, I saw from my eyes in Hague happening live in front of the whole world.
That's so true. And it's so sad, actually, that Aung San Suu Kyi was so much of a hero for the human rights movement for so many years, has turned out to be, a politician like any other. And in fact, a racist, a person who considers her own Burmese group to be the, anointed people of Myanmar, and who won't put up with anybody else in Myanmar. The Shan, the Kachin, the Rohingya, none of these other groups. And so the Burmese army continues to dominate Myanmar. So it was very sad. I was also, by the way, very disappointed in my colleague, Bill Shavis, who defended Myanmar.
It was such a shame for him to stand up and defend something so undefensible.
Bill followed me as the president of the International Association of Genocide Scholars. And I have nothing but respect for him as a person. But he was simply wrong about genocide. He made mistake after mistake in interpreting the Genocide Convention. This idea, for instance, that, oh my goodness, they only killed 10,000 people, so it can't be a genocide. That's wrong. That is simply wrong. The convention doesn't say that, and it doesn't even require that. So, I mean, there were just one thing after another. The worst thing, I think, was his insistence that if you can find any other explanation for why perpetrators did something besides the intent to destroy a group, then it can't be genocide. Well, that's nonsense. Any prosecutor can tell you that any given act can have multiple intents, and you can convict somebody of, doing something, even if he may have had other intents. When you shoot a gun at somebody, you pick up the gun and you pull the trigger on it. The only intent that's relevant is whether you pulled the trigger and aimed at the person. I mean, really, it doesn't matter if your objective was to rob the person. That may be another intent. But
So, Professor, I asked you a question about Sri Lanka.
Yes.
I thought it is important to go through the list of what are the 10 things which are so well defined. And now, thank God, thanks to your work, a whole lot of world, follows those. And I have seen articles written by journalists who follow that methodology. That's the power of pen. So thank you so much. But what do you think? How does it apply to Sri Lankan situation?
My own view, and by the way, I've been to Sri Lanka a number of times. In fact, we went right after the Civil War with Martin Luther King III, with Justin Trudeau of Canada, and there's a group that Martin Luther King III organized. It's really, what a group, my goodness sakes. How did they ever include me? I don't know, but I was in there with, the daughter of Bishop Tutu and the daughter of Nelson Mandela and Hariri's son. And I mean, wow. anyway, I was in there in Sri Lanka, and so we interviewed both, Muslims and also, Sinhalese and others about what had happened. And our conclusion at that point was that they had committed genocide, yes. The war apparently was over, but all of the danger signs were still there. Rajapaksa was still in charge. In fact, his brother committed a lot of the genocide himself. And so our real situation there was, I considered, still polarization. In other words, it was still a totally divided society. And I believe actually that that's still where Sri Lanka is. That is also the place where I think that India is. Preparation is perhaps, however, present in both Assam and in Kashmir, because that is further along in the stages. That's where they've really prepared to do terrible things. For instance, to the Bengali Muslims in Assam, they conducted a census. If people couldn't prove their Indian citizenship, then they were considered, quote, foreigners. They're building detention centers. This looks a lot like the prelude to serious persecution. So it's getting worse in Kashmir and in Assam. In Kashmir, of course, they locked down the whole state. The situation's terrible.
It's 250 days of absence of any basic freedom. I mean, we, are because of the pandemic in our homes, but we don't have any soldier with gun standing on our doors.
Right.
But that's what they are in. And similarly,
no question. That's stage 8. That's right before genocide.
Terrible situation. Nadine, you mentioned that you greatly benefited from the work of Greg Stanton, and you refer to that. So does the USCIRF scholars have they studied genocide and they are familiar with all of that?
Yes.
Or your singular source is Professor Stanton? If he says it is, it is.
No.
We take a lot of information, but he's definitely the leader when it comes to mass atrocities and genocide. And of course, the steps are such an important tool to be able to take a look. And I think, I agree with you. And what I so respect about these steps is, and how do we get to never again? We keep finding ourselves in these situations with these situations of genocide. And that's why we felt at USCIRF it was so important to step out on India now, rather than to wait, because we saw these signs that were so troubling and that we knew they fit the definition of a country of particular concern, and that we needed to call it out at this point in time when they've already met, not waiting for worse atrocities to happen.
And I commend you on that. It was really very important that you spoke out. I really think that will have far more weight than anything we can do at Genocide Watch, and I'm so grateful to you.
Well, thank you. I also wanted to mention that the Holocaust Museum is putting together an exhibit for I just did a roundtable yesterday on the International Religious Freedom Roundtable. We did a special one on Burma where we had about 50 participants, including Dave Eubank from Burma. We had Matthew Shepard from Fortify Rights and some other folks, and of course Naomi Kikoler from the Holocaust Museum. And they will be doing an exhibit on asking for a genocide designation, focusing on Burma this summer. So I think that there will be another opportunity for these kind of discussions and for people to walk through and see the evidence, and hopefully that can have a big impact.
We at Justice for All are thankful to Greg Stanton for inviting us to join the Alliance, and yesterday we received the invitation. We pretty soon will join that. And the Holocaust Memorial Center in Long Island, New York, has invited us to provide them the material, and they have, based on that, they have developed an exhibit on Kashmir, Assam, Burma, as well as on Uyghurs. So they start talking about Holocaust and lessons, and then they apply to all of that. So I wrote the script, and they have designed, and they invited me to be keynote speakers. Awareness is going around, and I saw in between they follow Professor Stenton's methodology of 10 steps as well. So it was reflected in that. So what do you think? How can we influence India in that matter? Because India has a soft power. Although Gandhi is taken as a propaganda thing outside the world, and we all love Gandhi, well, Gandhi's killer is worshipped by some extremists there, and nobody seems to care for him. We are all busy in yoga and vegetarianism and things of this nature, but vegetarians have gone crazy when people are being lynched there because they were suspected of eating beef or carrying a cow, although some people in that business of milk industry were taking some of those people. So what is it which you suggest? I mean, people who are listening here, there are people who care for human rights. They are Muslims and they are neighbors of other faith who care for religious freedom, but they are all American citizens. What is it which we can do here in our country to take the cause of saving India from moving in this direction further? I know both of you have done your job. What is it which other people can do who are listening right now?
Nadine, you should go first, I think.
Well, I think, talk about it. I think, it's an important socialization of these issues. I think that's one of the, it's a good thing and a bad thing sometimes about social media. But, if you know a story you read something that concerns you, share it, like have conversations. Don't let these things go unspoken, because that's a lot of times when they're pushed away, and people, as you talked about at the beginning of the steps, just ignoring it and trying to write it off as not being what it appears to be, ignoring the facts. And if we're talking about the facts, they're not going to be able to ignore it. So I think that's an important thing. And I think, encouraging the U.S. government to get involved and to designate India as a country of particular concern, that is another thing that could help push things with India in the right direction.
So you have some hooks there. Congressman Wilson is willing to work with you. Yeah. I think it should result in they holding a hearing, even if it is through Zoom. And going through the report, they are circulating. He promised to circulate to 150 congresspersons. I don't know who those 150 are. Maybe you have to circulate to the rest of those people. And I hope you are going to invite your daughter and Professor Stenton to be in that hearing. At least he will be giving evidence. She will be taking autographs.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I had a comment about your question, because yes, of course, we have a lot we can do here in the United States, because even in the current situation, I think the United States is still looked to by many nations as a place where we have amazing freedoms and respect for human rights. And this perhaps reveals my own belief in humanity, but I believe that in every single person, when they are born with a conscience and with a sense of justice. If you ever try to do something unjust to the smallest child, they will let you know. And that sense of justice is what we can count on. And it's just recognized in every religion. And that's one of the reasons I believe strongly in the involvement of religion in protecting human rights. We can't let religion become an enemy of human rights and, a excuse for doing awful things to other people. Now, when it comes to the problems in India, I lived in India for a year. I was a Fulbright scholar there, and I actually have a lot of faith in India. I know that India is a divided society. It has the BJP, which is basically the political wing of the RSS, which is an extremist Hindu nationalist organization. I think it's practically almost like a Nazi party. And unfortunately,
Well,
that
Hitler is very popular there. I mean, it is in textbooks. They teach them Hitler's books, and there are Hitler's restaurants and tea shops. And I mean, I read an article in an Israeli paper about how popular Hitler is in India. So when you refer to Nazi, I think, but this is one side of it. Tell me the good side of people who are willing to stand up.
In fact, the supreme leader of the RSS, Golwakar, actually was an admirer of Hitler, as you know.
Yes.
But on the other side,
he actually says that we need to do to Muslims what Hitler is doing to Jews.
That's right. But on the other side in India is a very strong tradition of democracy and a free press. Even though I think the press has gotten a little too timid in India. The truth is, and right now the Congress Party is very disorganized, so it can't give much of an opposition. But I believe it'll come back, and I think it's not. I think India, in other words, the Constitution of India is so strong, and the basic feeling for freedom in India is so strong that these tendencies towards fascism in India will not win in the long run. So I actually believe that the opposition to Modi and his people, the best opposition will come from within India. That is, by the way, I think the best defense against genocide. It comes from within a country that's threatened by it.
That I fully agree, and I hope and I pray that way. But since this pandemic began, how they have handled people right now, even the chairman of the Minority Commission of the capital city, Delhi, has been raided and his stuff taken and arrested. People who were protesting, say, until December and January, about 500-600 of those leaders, professors, scholars, thinkers, journalists, they have been arrested. So I think fascism is in control. The leader of that group, what is called RSS, Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, he has the same level of security as the president and the prime minister, who, by the way, member of the same party. So they are in powerful position, and opposition is in disarray. But the good thing about those elections were that they were, I think, less than 40% vote, which this party got. They won because of intimidation, creating a environment. So demonization has reached a level, according to your list of things, which unfortunately give me a little bit of, I would say, disappointment to the level that say, oh, well, maybe even Congress may not be able to overcome, because it's the role of media. If media goes silent, what can you do? And media either has been purchased or intimidated, or in some cases, journalists have been murdered. I mean, India, the largest democracy in the world, I think it is 137th level when it comes to freedom of press at this moment. So do you still, I have mixed feeling. You're hoping, and I'm saying I'm into that. But at the same time, I'm worried.
I have hope. Yes, you're right. I do. In the long term, I certainly have hope. But I also believe that we have to strongly protest things like what the Modi regime is now trying to do in Assam, where it's essentially going to try to expel probably 2 million Muslims. That is exactly what happened in Myanmar. And guess where they'll go? They'll go to the same country, Bangladesh.
Right.
I mean, what a country that has welcomed all these people. I mean, we should be just giving huge amounts of assistance to Bangladesh right now.
We really should, and it's hard we actually interacted with their embassy just a couple weeks ago. We stay in close contact with them because we know they have struggles. The host community has struggles that has the Rohingya living there, and they said to us that the economy is really hurting now with COVID shutting everything down. And so here we are, demanding better things for the Rohingyas, and the host community themselves are having a food challenge. So you're right. We definitely need to be encouraging them, continuing to dialogue with them, and the conditions for the Rohingyas. But they welcomed them. The Rohingyas know that. I mean, when we interacted with them, they were very much. They'd say when we see, I remember them saying to me when we saw the Burma army, we'd run. When we see the Bangladesh army, we knew we were safe. So they definitely have a lot of warm feelings towards them.
We're very thankful to the countries who are welcoming refugees. 71 million refugees around the world, which happened in World War II. But in World War II, we came up with Never Again. We came up with the Genocide Treaty. We came up with the United Nations. But these 71 million refugees just created a little news for a couple of days, and that's where it is. So one of the challenges that now that Rohingyas are in Bangladesh, and Bangladesh is taking care of it. United States has given more than $600 million to take care of those refugees. And there is a case in ICJ and ICC. So do you have hope, Professor, since you were the one who declared it to be a genocide to begin with, do you have any hope that this international mechanism of ICJ and ICC will have any impact on Burma? Will these people will go back? I mean, I meet these refugees and they say, we want to go back. Bangladesh government want them back. People want them back. And in their schools, they don't allow them education beyond third grade. But you enter those third graders and they're being taught in Burmese language. And they're dressed in Burmese clothing. What is the future of these people?
That is a really hard question because, we've seen what happens to refugees before. Look what happened to so many people who had to flee Syria and Iraq because of ISIS. Most of those people have not gone back.
Right.
And I'm afraid that's going to exactly be what happens to Rohingya, because I don't think the Myanmar government is going to change. And they're going to have elections at the end of this year, But I think that Aung San Suu Kyi and her party are going to win again. And the military has 25% of the seats in parliament anyway. So the ICJ case, though, is important because if the ICJ finds that Myanmar violated the Genocide Convention, and I think it almost certainly has, then the ICJ can actually give orders to Myanmar. It can tell, this is not so simple. Let me just make it clear. They can give orders to Myanmar to take all these people back. They can give orders that they have to give reparations, huge amounts of money. For the Rohingya themselves. They can also order them to pay Bangladesh, Malaysia, and other countries where these people are now housed, compensation for all that it costs them. They can do a lot. Now, there's a big problem, though. Under the ICJ statute, once the ICJ has made an order, after all, the ICJ does not have a police force. What does it do? It has to then refer it to the UN Security Council.
Oh, no. Where sits China, which has created the largest concentration camp since the Nazis.
That's right. In fact, one of your leaders in your organization, Hannah, has asked me the question, what do I think about the situation of the Uyghurs? I believe they are right now undergoing cultural genocide. I believe the Chinese fully intend to turn as many Uyghurs as possible into essentially Chinese Han. That is, it's very similar to what some of our racist forebears in the United States tried to do to our Native Americans. They said, oh, well, go off to the reservation, but by the way, we're going to take away your children and we're going to make sure they all speak English and we're not going to let them speak their languages, and that's called genocide. But that's what has happened now to the Uyghurs. And not only are they being, of course, had this kind of cultural genocide occur to them, I believe they are essentially in situations of slave labor now.
Right. And
so I believe China is, besides North Korea, the world's worst human rights violator. And we should not forget that. So, I don't have a whole lot of hope that these Rohingya can go back to Myanmar. What I do hope, though, is that we will realize that we have to be willing to put up the money to help these people really get a new start for their lives.
Well, thank you so much. We just at the end of our conversation. I'm so thankful to you, Commissioner Nadine Manza, and I'm so thankful to you, Professor Greg Stanton. It's always a pleasure to meet with you. And I hope that you will be safe and healthy and continue to be productive. We all need to work our best. You know, one thing in my faith, Islam, is your duty is you do your job. Results are up to God Almighty. We don't control the world. But He will look, what did you do when you know it? And you have done something, Greg. Nadine, you have done something. And I continue to follow and work with you all. So thank you so much for joining us. And you will be happy to know this is the first broadcast of something called Muslim Network Television. Muslims have no television in America. This is the first one, and essentially it's a peace and justice network. So you're always welcome to always be here and join us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for
Thank you for having us.
Good of the rest afternoon and a nice weekend. Thank you so much.
having me.
Peace and salam.
Okay.